Hello, it's Annabelle Beckwith, trainer, facilitator and coach here once again, slightly later this evening. I keep switching about with the times, but welcome. Today I am going to be talking about confident voice. This follows on from a Facebook Live I did a few days ago on confident body language. At that point I mooted that, oh hi Caroline, how good to see you. At that point I mooted the possibility of doing something about confident voice, and a few people said they would be interested, and so here we are today. So there's a few things that I wanted to cover in this. I would like to also get a bit of interaction if possible, so if you're here watching live, if you could put hashtag live in the comments box. If you're watching the replay, if you could put hashtag replay, that would be useful for me to know who's watching when and so on. So there's three things that I want to cover today. One is a little bit about emotions and how emotions impact on the voice, and to many respects these will be statements of the obvious, but the thing is that emotions do impact on the voice, and because our emotions will come out in our voice, people will respond to the tone of voice that we are using almost before they start to tune into the content of what we're saying. I'll explain a little bit more about that. You'll have experienced, and we've all experienced this. But that's the first thing, how emotion impacts on the voice. The second thing I'm going to look at is oh hi Sarah, thanks for stopping by. Two of the things that really impact on how confident we sound is the pace of our voice, the pace of our speech, how quickly we're speaking, and also the pitch. What's the level of our voice? Are we speaking in a very low tone of voice? Do we have a high-pitched voice? That has a huge impact. So I'm going to talk about a few things around how we can manage that to some respects and make sure that we're having the gravitas and authority that we need to have in whatever situation we find ourselves in. The third thing I'm going to look at is not strictly linked to voice and vocal quality. It's more to do with, oh hi Debbie, it's more to do with some of the choices of vocabulary that we make. Because some of those are working in our favour and some of those aren't. Some of those are undermining our authority, even although we might not realise it. Hi Michael, thanks for stopping by. So a couple of things, just to start there, about how emotions impact on the voice. Now, this is obviously a statement of the obvious. And in fact, if anybody's got any comments about what tends to happen to their voice, or what types of things trigger them to sound nervous, to sound angry, to sound upset, what kind of thing triggers you? That's a useful thing to start to recognise in yourself. But what will happen is that we will feel an emotion and it will come out in our voice. We will start to sound angry, we will start to sound a little bit upset, something will happen, and the person that we're speaking to will pick these things up in our voice and respond to that emotion almost at a kind of a limbic level, a sort of lizard brain level, before they respond to the content there. Caroline said a quavery voice when stressed. You think many people will have that. You're sounding a bit nervous and your voice is a bit wobbly. So I'm going to look in a minute about some of the things that we can do to try and offset that. So the emotions will come through in the voice. And the thing is, quite often we will also respond instinctively to emotions that we hear in somebody else's voice. If somebody says, "What did you do that for?" we're likely to go, "Well," we're likely to respond in kind. It's an instinctive thing. Oh, hi Katie, thanks for stopping by. It's an instinctive thing, and actually sometimes the best thing to do in that moment when we start to feel tense, and this is a key point, when we start to feel tense or nervous, is to stop, breathe and think in that order. And by doing so, we are able to respond in a more measured and thoughtful way than just to react. Somebody's come at us with something and we're right back in their face. Not always helpful. So when we're thinking about emotions, the first thing to do is recognise what can trigger you to start to feel a little bit nervous, because that will potentially come out in your voice. If you can recognise what tends to make you nervous, then you can do things to prepare for that particular event, for that particular conversation, to keep your voice in check and make sure that you come across in an authoritative way. Well, hi Jason, thanks for stopping by. So that you can come across still in an authoritative way. So the sorts of things that might trigger somebody is, well, actually, to be fair, the sort of thing that might trigger somebody is thinking, oh my goodness, I've got to do a Facebook Live, or a presentation or something like this. When I was younger, I did an awful lot of drama training, so I quite like this kind of thing, I have to say. But I do recognise that a lot of people are uncomfortable with it. There's also, maybe you've got to give somebody a difficult piece of news. Maybe you're going to go and ask your boss for a pay rise. Maybe you're an entrepreneur or a business owner and you're going to go and ask some investors for funding. What is the sort of thing that is going to make you feel nervous, and therefore that might come out in your voice? Stop, breathe, think. I'm going to focus for a little bit on that breathe bit because, again, as a statement of the obvious, but it's so obvious we almost don't think of it, is the voice is underpinned by the breathing. So quite often what will happen is if we're feeling a little bit nervous, a little bit tense, we will tend to take short and shallow breaths and sort of gasp in a little bit. And this is causing us to speak from the throat. We're taking shallow breaths, so we have to speak in shorter sentences. We tend to speak a little bit more quickly because we have to get the sound out because we've not taken enough air in, and basically we're only using the top part of our lungs. That is not the sort of breathing to use if we want to sound authoritative and if we really want to be able to use our voice to come across in an assertive manner. Hi Nige, thanks for coming. So breathing. Now there is a possibility that this is going to turn into a bit of a weird Facebook Live with me doing some sort of vocal exercises and so on. But excuse me a moment. The sort of breathing I'm talking about here is not necessarily just, if you're sort of, we all breathe. I mean, it's one of those things. People will likely be sitting there thinking, what is she talking about, knowing how to breathe? I'd be dead if I didn't. But what I'm talking about is being conscious about your breathing, perhaps. So it's not just the sort of normal breath of you just like sitting at your desk and tapping away. It's the sort of breath, a really big old lungful of air, that if you had, this is a bit gross, but I'll say it anyway, if you had a cough and you could feel that you had something lodged in your chest and you wanted to just get rid of it, you would take a big old lungful of air in order to get rid of it. Sorry, I know it's gross, but that's the only way I can think of on the spur of the moment to describe the kind of breath I'm talking about. It's a big old lungful of air. And it really is filling you up. It's not a breath to hear, it's right down into the diaphragm. You're really filling your lungs. Once you've got a big old breath of air, then you are able to manage your voice. You can manage the speed at which you speak. You don't have to speak super fast because you know you've got enough breath to get you to the end of the sentence. You can modify the tone of your voice, you can modify the pitch of your voice, as well as I've just said, the pace. So make sure that, particularly when you're starting to feel a little bit tense, that your breathing isn't becoming shallow. Make sure you take a couple of good deep breaths. And actually, as an aside, that's also getting oxygen to your brain to help you to think more clearly. Otherwise, this kind of panic breathing is getting oxygen in really quickly so that it can basically fight or flight. It can go straight to your limbs and you can run away from the attacking saber-toothed tiger or something, which is fine if you're a caveman, not so great if you're just going to go in and ask an investor for funding or something. So be really, really aware of your breathing. A deep breath in to calm yourself down and give you enough puff to get your voice out there. So let me just focus for a little bit on pace and pitch. Now I've got a bit of a cough here, as I've had for a little while, so excuse me if I'm starting to get a bit croaky. When I was doing my Facebook Live on confident body language, one of the things I mentioned there was that confident people take space and time. And similarly, in terms of the pace at which you speak, confident people will take the time they need. Sometimes you can see people who are perhaps giving a presentation and a bit nervous about it, and they are, hello, my name's Annabelle, and I'm here to talk to you today about they're speaking really, really fast, and the impression that you get is, however well they know their subject area, the impression you get is like, man, they just cannot wait to get away, can they? They just want to be off the platform, back in their seat, and it's actually undermining the message that they're putting across. So breathing and being able to speak in a measured tone is actually important. Do you know what? It's actually really quite important. If the person across the table from you is starting to get a bit agitated, they're starting to get a bit cross, it's actually quite useful to be able to maintain a moderate tone and not rise to their level of agitation. And then that, one would hope, but that's got more chance of bringing them back down to a more measured level, rather than it turns into a bit of a ding dong because you both start shouting at each other. So a measured tone. Of course, some people will speak very slowly, perhaps under the impression that it makes them sound thoughtful. Using pauses and speaking slowly can be useful to draw attention to a particular point. But if you speak too slowly, everyone's going to be looking at their watch thinking, "Go on, Bennett, we want to. How long is this going to take?" So pause, slow down to emphasise a point. Maybe, "Oh, there's my dad. Hi, Dad. Thanks for watching. I didn't know that you could even do Facebook Live, but anyway, that's great." So yeah, don't speak too slowly all the time. Use that in a measured way to draw emphasis to what you're saying. So speaking at a moderate tone, I guess it just underlines the fact that you've got, oh, hi Michael, thanks for stopping by. It underlines the fact that you are in control vocally. By the way, while you're speaking in this measured way, try and make sure your shoulders are relaxed, because again, a physical presence in combination with these vocal techniques will again add to the impression of authority and of assertiveness. So there's also a really, really big thing about the pitch of your voice. Now, here's the thing, and this is where sometimes women can be at a disadvantage, is because, okay, let me try a little experiment, and I do this quite often in the training room. If I say to you, well, the good news, everybody, is that the project is proceeding according to plan, and I'm delighted to say we're going to be finished by the deadline date. Or if I say, well, good news, everybody, project's proceeding according to plan, and we're going to be finished by the deadline date. Which one do you instinctively feel is more convincing? Now, you may, as you're watching this, think, well, I would know the person, and I would know whether to believe them or not. Well, this is true. The extent to which you know the person will govern that. But in general terms, higher pitches of voice tend to have less authority when you are trying to put across a serious message than lower tones of voice. This is why many female politicians, Margaret Thatcher being famously a case in point, went to speech coaches and vocal coaches to bring their voice level down a little bit. So it is just something to bear in mind. The other thing is, quite often, excuse me, when we start to get a bit nervous and agitated, quite often our voice will go up. We will start to get a bit leery. Yep, if I'm shouting at my kids were small, when I was having a go at them, if I was going, "You kids, and you stop doing this, and how many times have I done?" And your voice starts going up and up and up. And subconsciously, the kids know that you've lost it. Your colleagues will know that you've lost it. Your direct reports and your team will know that you've lost it. Hi, Tori. Thanks for stopping by. Oh, Giovanni, great to see you. So the emotion will tend to push the voice up, and people will immediately know that you've slightly lost it now. You're a little bit on the edge. Bring it back down. It has composure and it has authority. Oh, actually, there's a brilliant documentary. I caught it on a flight. I think it doesn't matter where I was going. I was on a flight going to deliver a training program somewhere, and came across this fantastic documentary that was, it's a National Geographic documentary. You'll find it on YouTube, and it's called Alpha Male Ape Man. It's about 45 minutes long, well worth a look. So in essence, just to digress slightly, the documentary is looking at is looking at leadership, is looking at body language and voice, and alpha maleness. So what they did is they approached this bunch of blokes and said to them that they were making a documentary about team building or something, but they weren't. Oh, hi, Nathan. What they were actually doing was making a documentary on who was the alpha maleist of these self-proclaimed alpha males. So they got them fixing a car and doing various things. And actually, in terms of the body language, what they were doing, they juxtaposed these guys fixing a car and chimps and gorillas, and, you know, no disrespect, gentlemen, but there wasn't an awful lot of difference. But as you know, within the workplace, you know, there were some really useful things to think, oh my goodness, I know people who do that. Or, I wonder if there's a way that I can use my physical presence and my voice and the use of the space and the territory around me to assert my authority on the scene before me. But back to the matter at hand. They had this experiment about 20 minutes in, where they had this man standing at a busy station somewhere in the UK, and commuters are coming to and fro. It's in the rush hour, and in front of him he's got a large square marked out on the floor. And as people are coming towards him, he's just telling them to get out of his box. He is like alpha male, protecting his territory. So, oh, hi, Deborah. So he's protecting his territory there, and people are coming towards him, and at first he's using a higher level of voice, going, get out my box, get out my box. And it doesn't matter how loud he says it, people are literally going, ah, and just walking straight through this marked out square on the floor. He then changes the level of his voice and starts speaking low and loud and starts saying, get out my box, get out my box, get out my box. And you would not believe it. Watch the documentary, it's fantastic. People literally start body swerving out of this imaginary territory because his voice has the authority to actually make them do something. Now, there's something in that. So I guess the question then is, well, how on earth, well, that's great, but if you don't have a particularly low voice, how do you get one? And one of the things this isn't about is changing your voice and changing your vocal style, because that's so much about who you are. What it is about is recognising the scope that you have within your voice to really use it when you're communicating. And a lot of people aren't aware of this. They will only use like this much of their vocal range where actually there's this much at their disposal. So one of the things, sounds enough, sing in the shower, because then you really will get used to your vocal range. But one of the things that I tend to do when I'm delivering a program or a workshop or working one-to-one with somebody who wants to work on their voice, or they're working on their presentation or the public speaking skills or something, is get them to do this little kind of singing exercise that I was a member of a choir once, and our choral conductor used to get us to do this as part of a warm-up, simply to get used to the scope of our voice. And basically, this is where it gets a bit weird because I'm going to demonstrate this. Basically, all he asked you to do was take that deep breath in that I was talking about earlier and just hum comfortably within your vocal range. So you're literally just going, you're not going, you're not forcing it down. You can't feel it in your throat. Your voice is just comfortably fluctuating up and down. And in a speaking context, you can take this on a bit and go, So if I wanted to, I could quite comfortably talk in quite a high pitch of voice. Unless I was talking to a cat or a small child, I might not want to use this, but you never know when that might be useful. It's useful to know that if I needed to, I could talk in a voice like that. Or I could pitch my voice quite low, and suddenly I sound very serious indeed. But it's also useful to know how low can your voice go, because you never know. You might be in a situation where, let's say, giving a presentation where maybe you feel that people are getting used to your tone of voice and you want to change it up a bit. You can stop, breathe for a moment, think, pitch your voice somewhere else. So we're talking about something, and then it's, so if you remember nothing else, remember this, blah, 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 or whatever the point happens to be. Get used to the vocal range that you have, and just think about how you might pitch it around and use your voice to every possible advantage in communicating your message. So that's just a little bit about pace and pitch and so on. But do check out that documentary. It's absolutely brilliant. I've seen it so many times now. I see something new in it every time. It's absolutely brilliant. There's an awful lot to say about voice. It tends to be one of those things that it's easier to have somebody standing in front of you and working one-to-one rather than trying to do it in this way. But anyway, I'll just share one or two things. The third thing that I wanted to talk about is actually more to do with language. So sometimes our choice of words isn't as strong as it might be. So let me give some examples. I had a habit, and do you know, it just dawned on me that this is what I was doing. I used to annoy myself without knowing why, because if somebody moved aside to let me past, or they held a door open for me, or maybe we're walking down the pavement and they have to move towards the shop for me to walk past, and I would always like sidle past and go, oh, sorry. I thought, why? And then I just caught myself one day and thought, why do I keep apologising? I've not done anything wrong. They've politely moved aside so I can get by, or, you know, done the decent thing and held the door open. Why do I keep apologising? So I just decided, right, from then on, I'm just going to go, thank you. Now, this is a tiny, tiny thing, but sorry is somehow, well, it is apologetic. It's like, oh, I'm sorry, I put you to inconvenience. Thank you is a greeting equal to equal. I know it's a tiny, tiny thing. It doesn't matter if you're passing some randomer on the street. It probably matters more if you're in the workplace and your method of approaching somebody else to ask them is like, oh, I'm sorry to disturb you, or sorry, have you got a minute? Why apologise? Try to, unless you actually owe somebody an apology, there's a word that you could well do with eliminating from your habitual vocabulary. So there's also things like, and this happens a lot when you're speaking with a group of people, and it's like, we need to do this, we need to do that, we need to do that. Do you know what? That kind of statement contains no level of commitment whatsoever. I will, blah, 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 is actually quite a bold statement, but it's also one that carries authority. It does carry gravitas. It does carry a sense of purpose. We must do far, 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 particularly in a group setting, is potentially dangerous. Everyone will sit there and nod and go, yeah, we must do well. And what they're actually thinking subconsciously is everybody else is going to do this and I'm going to do exactly what I've always done. So that commitment of I will, I shall, I do, me, I, are not words that imply that somebody else is making you do it. I need to, I must. It's a small thing, but sometimes these really subtle shifts in vocabulary can make a big difference. Excuse me. Make a big difference in terms of, perhaps not in terms of the actual message you're putting across, but in terms of the impression that you give when you put that message across. So look at some of these subtleties of vocabulary. Are you saying things that might be perhaps not as assertive, not as purposeful as you might want them to be? Are you saying things like me constantly apologising for everything? Are you saying things that might not be useful in presenting yourself as a person of authority? So those were the things that I just wanted to talk about in this little Facebook Live. So just as always, to recap, your emotions will come out in your voice. They just do, because we're human beings, and something will happen, and our voice will go a bit wobbly. The thing that will get around that, or that will help that, is be aware of those. Oh, did you hear my finger crack then? Ow, that was quite sore. So the things that will help if your emotion is starting to show in your voice is be aware of things that trigger you to perhaps feel a little bit nervous, to perhaps feel a little bit angry. If there's somebody that you think, oh, here they come again. What triggers you to feel slightly emotional? Stop, breathe, think. On that note, really think about your breathing. Relaxed shoulders and a big breath in, so that you have enough lung capacity, you have enough in your lungs to be able to speak with a voice of authority. You won't have to speak really quickly because you've not got enough breath, and you're not gasping breath in and your throat gets dry, and then you start clearing your throat and sounding even more nervous than you are. Take a big old breath in, and that will sustain your voice, and it will give you the ability to better control your voice, basically, in terms of the speed at which you speak and also the level at which you put your voice. So also when it comes to pace and pitch and so on, sing in the shower, do that humming exercise, get used to the vocal range that you have. Start playing about with it, practice with it, and just try and experiment a little bit. Speak to people, in maybe friends and family. Try it on your kids. Try it on your kids. I used to do that when they were little. Instead of going, you kids, it would be, what's going on? Try it. Try it in low risk situations where it doesn't matter so much. And then once you get used to your voice and the full extent of it and how you can use it to come across with authority, gravitas, and as an assertive and influential person, get used to it, low risk situations, so that you can deploy it in situations where it matters. And that third point there was about just being mindful of your vocabulary. What are the specific words that you're choosing? Are they lending you authority, or are they very, very subtly undermining that authority in some way? So I hope that's been useful. Normally it takes all day to work through these things because voice is a very physical thing. So, you know, we tend to spend a lot of time doing physical activities and so on. This has just been a short gallop through. So thank you very much. Oh, hi Christine, I'm just about to finish. But thanks for stopping by anyway. So yeah, thank you to all of you who have stopped by for the live. And again, if you're watching on the replay, please put #replay. It's always useful for me to know who's catching up afterwards. So enjoy the rest of your evening. That's me for now. I'll see you on another Facebook Live sometime soon. Bye for now.